profits, people, purpose, doing business by respecting the earth. These are the confessions of a radical industrialist, and that is our guest, Ray Anderson. Bill Russell, I think I interrupted you as you were looking for the 1000th generation, and are we going to have something
there's
they can live with?
To be hopeless, to think that, we've talked a little bit, what can I do? But there's also just the magnitude of the problem, and I would like briefly just to step through some of the things that you have done. And I think specifically, the first step with the environment was the damage that was being done. I think that was when we first became aware. Rachel Carson, the Cuyahoga River burns, a whole range of different things. It finally woke us up that we had some problems. The first thing is to get rid of the waste, and particularly the toxic waste, the things we pump into the air, that we pump into the ground, that we pump into our water.
And into our bodies by virtue of all of those things.
Yeah.
How did you address that? Because you pumped a lot of that stuff out.
Oh, sure. Well, we operate these factories, okay? And there's a supply chain that brings the raw materials to the factory. We produce our products, we make some waste, we make some emissions, we make some effluent, and we ship our product. But whatever comes into our factory will go out in one of those four streams: product, waste, emissions, or effluent. And so the only way to prevent the bad stuff going into the biosphere is to keep it from coming into your factory in the first place, which means working upstream with suppliers to create the screens that screen out the bad stuff, the stuff that never should have been taken from the earth in the first place. Some of it was put there over the billions of years, sequestered by nature, cleaning up this biosphere so we'd have a place to live, and putting that toxic stuff down there where it belongs so we could have a biosphere up here to live in, and we bring it right back into our living room, so to speak, by our industrial processes. So you work upstream, you create the screens, and you cannot imagine how difficult that is, because suppliers don't want to tell you what's in their products, because oftentimes they themselves don't know, because their suppliers haven't told them. And so you chase this daisy chain back all the way to the mine and to the oil well, and you finally figure out what's coming into your factory, and you say, no more of that. And then you have to find the substitutes. You have to end up with a product that performs and meets all the conventional tests of the market, and also has this added advantage of no toxics. It's very hard to do, and over the period of years we've managed to do that, and to clean up the inputs to the factory so that what's going out is harmless to the biosphere. And that's the second face of the mountain, really.
There is this sense, excuse me.
Well, there are two sort of symbols, metaphors, which is the pipe going out, the effluent, and the smokestack going up.
Yeah.
How many of those were you able to get rid of?
Well, we're rid of a third of our smokestacks, 70% of our effluent pipes, simply by changing processes in the factory and by changing the stuff coming into the factory through the supply chain. It's a combination of those two things.
Some of the things that were coming in, you say that your suppliers didn't know. Maybe they didn't want to know.
Could be. Yeah, there's a lot of denial, all through the industry, which is, coming back to why aren't more companies doing this more quickly is, again, denial's at work. It's garden variety. It's too hard to think about. Can't be true. So I'm moving on.
There is this wonderful...
I'm not moving on. I'm standing pat. I'm standing pat in the status quo, and the status quo is an opiate. It really dulls our minds and our vision to what's going on around us.
But you point out, and it seems to be an important part of this, if they sit still and the world keeps moving, then they'll be out of business.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing.
It's almost as if the very business of business is denied when you don't look at these crushingly immediate challenges.
Well, I put the blame squarely on Milton Friedman and his mantra, business exists to make a profit. Well, it's the blind pursuit of profits that have created the financial crisis that the whole world's economy is in right now. And it's also that blind pursuit of profits that's the greatest threat to the biosphere. and to our very existence on earth. This blind pursuit of profits without regard to the consequences, the externalities particularly.
And it's not that you're against profit.
Oh no, I'm for honest profit. Honest, and I mean that in the sense of not at the expense of the earth, and not at the expense of future generations. I prefer to make our profits at the expense of the inefficient adapter, the competitor who just doesn't get it. And as market shares,
there's an echo here.
Yeah.
Let's see. Doesn't get what?
Yeah, he doesn't get the fact that the earth is finite as a source and as a sink, and the consequences of our actions are important, and we need to be thinking about those consequences over the really long term. And business does not exist to make a profit. Business makes a profit to exist, and it must surely exist for some higher purpose. I don't know a CEO that really expects to stand before her or his maker someday and talk about shareholder value. I think that conversation's going to be on other subjects. Yeah, let me tell you, God, about this great deal I've made, Nah, I don't think so.
ROI, all the wonderful things. In addition to Friedman, though, you also, and this is one of the problems of market fundamentalists and of economics, you talk about the standard rhetoric that, they're not $20 bills laying all over the sidewalk.
Yeah.
If there were, people would be picking up the $20 bills, and yet you have found
they would already have been picked up.
Yeah,
there can't be any there because they already would have been.
Because the market's efficient, and
Not so.
Not so.
And your experience is, and I think this is as much as anything is the important lesson of that. We are looking at not $20 bills; we're looking at $1,000 bills scattered all over the place.
Absolutely.
And walking right past them.
Absolutely.
How can that be?
How can that be? There's a mental model, exists in every person's head of how things are, and the business person has her or his own mental model too. And if those mental models were shaped by the economics that they studied in college, they have a flawed view of reality.
Amen.
The first lesson of Economics 101, the first lesson, the first day, talks about the basic economic problem that drives all of economic progress. And this is the gap between what we have and what we want. Not need, want. And it's that gap the economists tell us we can never close, human nature being what it is. Whatever we have, we will always want more. Well, there's a little bit of a problem for about 4 billion people around the earth with that concept, where we in the West are pursuing what we want as opposed to what we need, and they don't have the proverbial pot. So there's a vast injustice, at the very least, in this concept of economics and the basic economic problem. And it's the blind pursuit of creating stuff that people want that is at the heart of the industrial system, and is a flawed heart of the system.
So what happens in a world when you pursue what people need rather than want?
Yeah. Well, you get a reordering of priorities, and you begin to realize that maybe happiness fits into this equation somewhere.
What a concept.
Yeah, what a concept. How about a little more happiness with a little less stuff? And I think perhaps that's one of the things that's happening right now in the economic crisis in which the world finds itself. People are reordering priorities. Whether we'll get far enough, to change the system this time around, I doubt. It'll take some more crises, but eventually humankind will, through this enlightened self-interest, will come to its senses, and we'll change this whole
or be
system.
driven to its senses. I'm sitting here kind of choked up because the air is toxic in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it isn't, do I like or not like toxins in the air and microparticulates, which is the reason that I'm all choked up. It's, am I going to be able to breathe? Are my children going to be able to breathe? Will the trees be able to live? So it isn't just, well, wouldn't it be nice? This is real stuff.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And where does that fit in the business model?
Yeah. Yeah, it's an externality to the business world today. I mean, that's your problem, not theirs. Even though they caused it, it's an externality. And you can be certain there's nothing built into their cost structure to cover your medical cost. That's your problem.
Or the fact that somebody's kid has had an asthma attack and so they miss work, and there's sort of a lack of what you call connecting the dots.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And those dots are back to all those things in decline, aren't they?
Absolutely. That's the fundamental problem, that we have a biosphere in decline, and we have an industrial system that's the prime cause of that.
You also talk about honest markets as opposed to the markets that we inhabit now. And honest markets, presumably, at least as a first pass through, would internalize all those externalized costs. And until we do that, talking about markets is self-justification or rationalization, but really is not an honest representation of what's really going on in the marketplace. Everything else aside, just in terms of the marketplace.
Right. I spent those years on the President's Council for Sustainable Development during the Clinton years, and there was the PCSD, President's Council, during the first Clinton term, and then renewed for the second Clinton term. I joined it in the second term. But the people working on that issue in the first term, how to visualize a sustainable America, came down to one fundamental bedrock principle. If you're going to change America and move towards a sustainable America, you must figure out how to get the prices right. So the prices reflect full cost, including the externalities. And then and only then will you have an honest marketplace that can allocate resources in a truly intelligent way. But without internalizing the externalities, if the oil companies get to shed the responsibility for protecting the oil in the Middle East and put that on the taxpayer through the military, and not reflected in the price of a barrel of oil, we will never get a true competition between oil and the other renewable sources of energy. Oil will always have this built-in subsidy, this built-in advantage, and until we level that playing field, oil will have this unfair advantage in the energy field. So get the prices right and let an honest market work. We've never had that. Not in the history of the world have we truly had an honest market.
Which is why lobbyists are so popular. Well, it seems that there's another perspective on essentially the same thing, which is, and it's again why your example is so important, is the stories we tell. The stories we tell are essentially our culture. It affects what we believe, what we experience, how we see the world around us. And as long as we believe Economics 101, and as long as we believe that it's okay to externalize the cost of protecting oil wells in, say, Iraq, and all the things that we externalize, all the things, we're not telling honest stories. The stories that actually reflect the way the world works. And the world, we can't vote on the laws of physics. We can't decide today we're not going to have gravity because it's inconvenient.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that part of what is so important and what you're able to do in your organization, but also what you're doing as an example, is changing the available stories, the things that are possible.
We're going to have more of those stories from Ray Anderson in just a moment. So again, so as not to interrupt you two, we'll be back in just a moment with Ray Anderson, whom we are privileged to have joined us in conversation. Be with us.